Welcome to another 2MK Kame House stream. Today, as always, we'll be in our normal position, our lobby, US East Coast 2, ring match priority lobby 02. And you're looking for the ring outside of Kame House itself. Beginners are welcome. The passcode is 2717. This can be found in our tweet and in the stream title at any time.
It's all or nothing.
Today we're working on looking for opportunities and playing relatively slowly relative to them. It's possible in most fighting games, if you are relatively confident, to wait out your opponent until you understand some of their tendencies. We often call this playing with your life, i.e. your health bar, in order to get more information. In very fast-paced games, or new unfamiliar ones, you have to take it slow and make sure that you can get that information without losing too much health. But more importantly, whatever you have trained should be a way to deal with the new situation so that when you identify them, you can at least try immediately to take an action based on them.
Get ready.
For example, I know in this case that my opponent's tendency toward this team and this character often involves trying to hit with certain very specific moves. Due to their discomfort in the neutral. I can take advantage of this over time, but not if I don't have the combos to take advantage of the actual hits I get as a result of it. However, playing slowly allows me to watch their health and other plans fairly well. Similarly, I'm quite aware that after a while, my opponent will become very frantic about moving. And my question is whether or not I can track that movement enough. Is this a bait, for example? It did work. Learning to watch your opponent can get you a couple of moves ahead of them if you understand their emotional state. But of course, as you've noted, you can pay a lot of health in order to learn these things. And you have to take a lot of risks in order to learn certain minute parts of the rhythm. For example, knowing that your opponent is likely to try for things like big level 3s or similar. Trying to bait that move. But if you have gotten to the point where they are acting,
A fierce showdown is about to begin.
And they twitch, you may feel as if you didn't succeed at all, that you got punished. It is important in a lot of cases to watch replays very carefully to see whether or not your opponent started their move before you actually started yours, or before a point where one could reasonably expect that they had responded or reacted to the thing you did. And that is particularly difficult and interesting in Dragon Ball FighterZ, especially at the lower levels. The game feels frantic enough that it can be difficult to see whether or not you or your opponent move first. Another reason why one must often play in life by staying still a little bit longer and seeing if your opponent gets to open you up, for example. Since it can be really important to know. A more frantic opponent is harder to read in this way unless you're willing to take some hits to actually see. For example, did you get hit by Kid Boo's 2M because Kid Boo reacted to something you did? The chances are you did not, because it's extremely difficult for Kid Boo to react to anything in that way. But given that the move is relatively safe, Kid Boo also is more likely to have just hit that move naturally. Whereas, if you have a decent idea of where the opponent's next attack is coming from, certain things absolutely are reactable. In fact, this game contains a lot of moves that have special properties to help make other moves less likely to hit in trade. One good example is that our beam attacks tend to cross the screen all in one shot once they have actually started. So depending on where on the screen your opponent is watching, they may not see a beam until it's too late. They have to expect and react to the beam. The expectation aspect is what allows them to watch your character for the beginning of the beam and basically deflect, because deflect is usually about the only thing you can do in time other than your own level 3. There are certain abilities, therefore, that you also learn to pay for in health, simply because it's impossible to learn to do it under match stress conditions without being in some form of match stress conditions. Generally though, we're not saying that you should not attack. That's not the necessary information here. But rather, that measuring your exact intent with your attacks can be very different than in other games. Accepting that you are too far away to do certain things and staying still enough or moving slightly with the intention of doing a particular thing are all very important. It's easy to fall into the trap of not playing neutral in this game because it feels like you should dash up immediately, or to go the other binary route and feel as if you should just try to zone from wherever you are. Neither of these things is true. Even if you are going to dash, one of the main movement things you need to learn in this game is when to dash less than you expect, and the fact that you will leave yourself slightly open when you do so, even though in this game you do go from dash to block fairly fast. This is also why it is so important to learn how to move using your auto combo. You're not necessarily less vulnerable for doing so. In fact, often you are in some trouble. But at least then it is easier to say that you have a particular plan in mind. Whether your character does it by the dashing long jump, their forward or crouching medium, or by having a quickly forward moving auto combo. But by doing specials or full dash ins, you telegraph your intention and your psychological state to your opponent fairly heavily. Opponents who have a decent to strong understanding of how to play the psychological game in fighting games therefore can dismantle you fairly easily. And they manage this whether or not your reaction was to stay completely still because you felt lost, or to move fully across the screen because you don't want to wait. Therefore today, our topic is movement, which goes with the theme of it being way too hot. The main thing is that it is hard to get used to the idea that in this game, movement speed is not necessarily decided by your character's walk speed, because it's not a game in which people walk very much. Your general goal is to find your character's movement options, whether it be, for example, the long dash jump available to my team, the various mix-up style ground to air movements on Omni Rabbit's team, warp options from others in general, or just really good auto combos and forward moving heavies.
Get ready. Fight it out.
We always suggest that when you're getting used to a new character and trying to understand how they play, you begin by using their auto combo to move around. So today, let's talk about the auto combo and the long jump, as these are both connected to other things we've already discussed. Both the auto combo approach and the long jump approach synergize really well with calling of assists in order to cover either the space you're not covering or your opponent's defensive option. I thought the Gohan always does sort of hit damage. Honestly, it's really surprising that the only way the character gets any damage is if he opens you up in a specific way, which is annoyingly avoidable. Which is why teams built around him tend to have so much requirements on their synergy. Fortunately, A large part of what makes a good adult Gohan team is, do I have a way to convert into big damage from somewhere? Which is not so hard to find in the game. So as an adult Gohan player, you should generally try to learn how to convert the damage, and for everyone else, learn to block low. Getting hit by his, like, elbow is not really anywhere near as bad as getting opened up by his crouching minion. As opposed to Tenshinhan, who just does damage. Good job, Tenshinhan. Means that this week Nodokan has switched to a lower damage team, so everyone else is probably going to get a little bit more experience in the same movement thing. Note that this isn't just character unfamiliarity either. Adult Gohan is a space control character, and Goku is effectively a zoner. He's a zoner with a couple more options, but that's like saying that Shotos aren't zoners in Street Fighter, or Kai is not a zoner in Guilty Gear.
Goku! Win!
おめえ本当に強くなったな。オラも嬉しいぞ。
Which brings us back to the concept of pain in life.
The battle's about to start. Good luck!
In this matchup, for example, what is Piccolo's best option for moving in on Broly? Piccolo has a lot of really good long-range normals, with the weakness that if the opponent moves into the air, they're harder to deal with. However, he doesn't really have to take that because he can do his counters immediately out of his forward dash. In order to do this correctly though, you must stop the forward dash at a particular space. I'm using a couple more combos this week. What about Frieza? How does Frieza best approach? Frieza approaches best by stopping his little short and doing his crouch heavy. His crouch medium is really good for it, but when you get it wrong, you stop less things, and your opponent doesn't get picked up as easily. So it's really long range, but you don't get as much out of it. If you really want to keep all your options, it doesn't work. So I'm here using this information to pay in life against my opponent's particular brand of defensive play that comes out, as we've noted on many streams before, as a result of the way that I play as a generality and the team not being able to attack it. You'll see a lot more counter attacks than actual attacks. Reacting to movement, reacting to shifts. This means that after a while, it becomes relatively easier to shut them down, because I know that they're going to be defending long enough that I can probably grab them with certain things, specifically Dragon Rush. Their other option is to use a ton of meter, which means eventually the meter will run out. From there, it's up to me to not miss, and to use my character's strength properly. But again, if your opponent is playing very defensively against you because of whatever reason, you're likely to spend a lot more time paying in life to try to figure out how to get your own style flow opened up. If you make a mistake, a defensive character will capitalize on it. So you could learn pressure instead, but that's not really an answer to the situation, because of the concept of paying in life here. So in my situation just now, I allowed myself to spend a lot of life trying to get in on someone who I know will just defend it all. You can use this to change your opponent's mindset. And a lot of the time when you're facing players online who attack in the same way all the time, or in similar ways all the time, they're doing it because of two potential reasons. Either they always manage to open people up when they do this, or they have decided to try to open you up in that particular way because they want to improve on it. You can normally tell which one of these things has happened based on how long there was in a pause at a particular point in the match. If they just started straight off doing a particular thing and kept doing that thing from the very beginning to the end, most likely that's just what they do all the time. But if you find that there's a pause where the opponent seems to be assessing their situation, but rather than defending or trying to find a way to use weakness specifically on you, they started a new attack method. They're trying to see what of those methods will actually open you up. The reason you should be careful about this is because the chances are that in that situation, you're not necessarily the better player. You're the more predictable one, because that means that the opponent thought it was a good idea to use you for practice of a particular attack string. In short, be aware of an opponent who keeps on attacking you even though you keep on punishing them. Especially if they keep on attacking in the same way. Because the chances are they're basically using you as their combo dummy. For example, to me, this match is about learning to measure the spacing at which I can keep my opponent blocking until Android 18's command grab is viable. I'm literally not paying attention to Omni Rabbit's anything because I know Omni Rabbit's offense does not match my defense at all. And Omni Rabbit's defense, while it is good, is good in a specific way against me. So if I wish to change the opponent I'm fighting, if I wish to look at different spacing, learning to read my opponent in this case is not that hard, basically. And I just don't mind if they chip away at me for a while. Of course, it helps that in elusive stays on lounge, you know that there's no penalty for learning to play a particular way. You can just do this with the expectation that you'll get to play again if you lose, and you'll learn something if you win. Learning how much you can pay in life and how to pay it is a high-level skill that you pick up over time. You can practice it by seeing how close you can get to losing a match without actually losing it. This works better in games like Guilty Gear and Dragon Ball FighterZ, where there's a lot more health recovery and a lot more strategic ways of increasing your stamina and your overall durability. In direct one-to-one fighting games where there is very little regeneration or where the damage is relatively heavy off of basic conversions because of the lack of other options, i.e. there have to be combo routes out of, say, crouch medium kick that lead to big damage because there aren't that many moves that then combo into other things. You may find it harder to pay in life, but you can try doing it early into a round, and then around halfway, start to play more seriously.
Are you ready?
But of course, the point is to bear in mind that if most of your damage is coming from punishing your opponent, eventually you'll meet an opponent who doesn't make those sorts of mistakes, and all of your damage will disappear. And while we're not really advocating that you try to learn to pressure everyone, understanding how to change your opponent's expectations and violate their expectations of your movement is a large part of Dragon Ball FighterZ at mid-level. So, while you should use DD mashup as a concept of how to play and get used to your characters and go through the beginning, you do have to be a little more careful when it comes to someone who has mastered that themselves, because then you are in the player matchup session, which is effectively what this is. Your assists are therefore connected to this concept. Figure out, not necessarily directly as pressure, but just as a general concept. How to use your assists along with your auto combo and your dash jump in order to get a proper approach. You can also, as shown, use your forward medium. Well, this tends to be a little bit more difficult because of how assists are called. Generally, the difficulty in calling your assist at that point, and what makes it more difficult for us to perceive that as a viable option, is that there is, as mentioned before, some slight execution involved. If you want to call your assist while dashing, or even at a particular point of a forward long jump, you must press down forward on your pad or stick in order to make sure that that's what you get and not a switch. It's definitely something worth working on though, because you can't rely on your auto combo with every character to get you where you want to be.
The battle's about to start.
Fortunately, as noted before, we're getting a lot of extra practice this week. Given that, as mentioned, Goku is a zoner more so, and a defensive character in a lot of ways. While he does have good conversions off of very specific things, he mostly specializes in being able to go from defense into decent offense relatively quickly, using his level 3, and open people up with a different option there. He's also one of the characters in the game who benefits absolutely the most from both assists and playing mid-range neutral. Meaning that he's not only hard to get in on in the exact way we're talking about, giving you good practice, but he doesn't punish you all that hard for when you fail. What he will punish you a lot for is moving around too much without a plan, because you will suddenly end up far too close to Goku for your own comfort. And unlike Gohan, all of Goku's combo routes work regardless of where you are in terms of height in the air. One of the important strengths of the character. Stronger defensive characters in this game do not tend to have a height restriction on their combos. As long as they hit you with the first hit, they'll manage some way to finish out the rest. Or they understand the player is able to use one of their relatively easy combo routes to identify the situation and lead into good damage. We've discussed on many streams before that this is one of Adult Gohan's downsides, where he just can't necessarily easily do this. He can get good damage, but because a lot of it involves I must now go into the air, and Adult Gohan doesn't have any aerial supers, he can't even begin one to call other people. So he has to rely on switching, tagging, and calling others in this particular special commands, which again require a lot of skill to confirm in terms of where this position is. So as we move into our intermediate training, we are going to be looking at that a lot more. Whether or not your character can deliver a full punish, even if it's not the same one as normal, on an opponent who has been slightly out of position, too high in the air, slightly too far away, were doing a move you weren't familiar with, those things.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess!
So, some characters actually have a different approach in that they don't have to move forward in order to maximize their effect. Kid Buu, for example, is more effective, similar to how Vegeta is. When you're unsure of what to do with Kid Buu, going straight upward into the air is often a good way to handle the opponent. They can't hit him without making sure that they have a lot of movement involved, especially at mid-screen. But Kid Buu can always hit them. He's effectively the Kame of this game. If Kame could dive kick without moving. He's also a character who benefits at long range from the long forward dash jump because he can cancel his momentum so relatively easily into anything he wants. By contrast, adult Gohan doesn't really have this ability so much. He can absolutely do the air leg attack, but the ranges of those are a lot more predictable. And they end up being dangerous to you if you do them wrong. Whereas Kid Buu just gets to get out of jail for free because your opponent is the one who must identify the situation within the short space of time. The same goes for Vegeta. Vegeta can get into the air and launch attacks that the opponent can't necessarily respond to. And can, even on his way back down, do his strong rush to hit anyone who attempts to make a movement. Anyone trying to get under Vegeta specifically can be uppercutted by Gohan in this case. This means that Vegeta is one of those characters who has the interesting option of moving away from the opponent more in order to re-establish his position on their knockdown. Specifically that once he has knocked them down, he can go up into the air and do Big Bang attack downward, and there's a particular space where the opponent can do very little about it, allowing him to recreate the position he prefers without having to stand so close to him. But the opponent cannot just go, oh, no problem, I'll just block that, because Vegeta has other options as well. Gohan's strength, on the other hand, is his relatively long stand heavy and ability to play neutral from a ton of positions. The flaw here is that being frantic about Gohan means you end up dropping all of those options really fast. And as you can see, most of Vegeta's moves tend to risk crouching unless you did them from the air or instant air attacks. You can also, as he just shown, use his light strike with the kick to move forward in ways that make it difficult for your opponent to do particular things. He has a good set of auto-correcting attacks as well, but generally can't be played as a rushdown character. Meaning that the difficulty that Rin faces in this matchup is that she often goes for pressure or ends up frantic because her pressure fails and then can't control her characters.
Time to begin the match!
So, how does a player reduce how frantic they are about something? The first method is to become more aware of your opponent's options and which ones of them you really care about getting hit by.
Ready? Fight! Counter!
For example, in this match I feel fairly comfortable using Piccolo's upward grab because the things that Kid Buu punishes me for using it with, like that, don't bother me a lot. Gohan, however, would punish me a lot more for using that move. For him, I need the Demon Shocker. Which is a very long-range move that will deal really easily with a character who is based so much on very close positioning and spacing. I can then make my opponent more and more frantic about the fact that they keep on getting hit with the Demon Shocker. And bait that sort of thing, for example. That, for example, I actually thought I was blocking because I knew that that was coming because my opponent is frantic. And that was entirely forgetting that Piccolo's counter does not go through supers, because I went up expecting that super. If you find you're getting dismantled in online matches, it's often because your opponent has figured out your emotional state. And even when you do manage to land some damage on them, it could just be an execution error on their part. Now let's look at what happens when two of our more frantic players clash. Their frantic reaction is different. In fact, literally the polar opposite. But that doesn't mean that the same thing doesn't happen. So in this case, let's just observe it for a while. And consider spacings and pressure points in the match. So far it's been established that Trunks can move in and keep attacking, giving Pipu the feeling to move. But note, for example, that Musaren moves almost immediately after every interaction, attacks almost immediately after every interaction. Whereas, Omni Rabbit defends almost immediately after every interaction. This system leads to, generally, Musaren losing relatively heavily because it means that every time they actually have a scramble, she will attack, and Omni Rabbit will defend. And it basically comes down to how much damage can be done off that defensive counter-attack. Over time, the meter advantage and the advantage with assists slowly shifts the match toward Omni Rabbit's side, because stuff like that keeps on happening. But they have a different problem beyond that. When a player has a particular style of play almost all of the time, when they become aware of this style causing a problem to them, they often binarily go in the other direction immediately. So, from Omni Rabbit's side, you'll get rampant use of level 3s, and some relatively crazy offense that won't necessarily be all that measured, because realizing that the opponent is now defending gives the feeling that one should deal with this in the opposite way than you normally do. But why exactly does one change one's playstyle? It's usually because you feel it's less effective now that your opponent has switched out of something. It's better therefore to have a secondary concept of what you want to do at a particular play, so that when your opponent changes their approach or their reaction to you, that you just add something to what you are already doing, rather than having to feel as if you need to rework your entire flow. It's no help to be defensive in the face of an opponent who normally defends against you if you have no plan as to what to do after that. Your nature will cause you to eventually be the one that moves first, meaning that the opponent will still be in that situation. As you can see, this interaction leads to a lot of situations that don't seem very measured between the two players. Isn't necessarily that they haven't measured anything, it's that they don't have an option for what to do in that space. Or at least not one that comes to mind really quickly.
ていくつも死闘を繰り広げてきたんだ。舐めてもらっちゃ困るぜ。 丈夫ですか？
Once again. Lot low.
相手はこの僕だ。許さんぞ。この程度か。マセコ大丈夫か？やるな。マセコよっウーさんこっかこっかよっありがとうございます。
死にたくなければ避けろ。
ありがとうございます。
やばい。
俺が相手だ。甘いや。僕も加勢します。
調子に乗るな。調子に乗るな。
点数をつけるとすれば
そこだ。
点数
ファイナルステージ。ワンダフル。こんなものか。5番アタック。無駄だ。
さあ間に合って。
調子に乗る。見えた。
僕も加勢します。
逃がさんぞ。
ちだ。
どうぞ。
うい。
逃がさんぞ。
えりゃ。許さんぞ。オラが相手だ。僕も加勢します。さあ間に合って。おて父さん。オラが相手だ。やっぱりお父さんはすごいな。これが今の僕の全力です。
Get ready for battle!
今度はこっちからやらせてもらうよ。ほらそら虫けらが生意気甘いですよ。待ってしまった。許さん。出番ですよ。生き残らず生かしては返さんぞ。虫けら絶対に許さんぞ。
死にたくなければ避けろ。
虫けらなるほど。虫けらなるほど。虫けらが許さんぞこの雑魚どもめ。戦いの感が鈍ってるな。父さんと一緒に戦えてすごく心強いです。
It's time to face your opponent!
This new team is a little bit more difficult to understand in the space of how to use their attacks and assists. They all have the ability to cover a lot of space on the screen with the assist, and this allows you to cover approaches to get back in. It does not have to be a zoning team, but it is a team that benefits from starting their concept of offense and play from the zoning position or perspective. With Vegeta in for the ride for those situations in which that's not really what you want. Since they will often also tend to be standing at that space on the screen, it helps further that it will make it more confusing as to exactly which character is in which space. As shown there, understanding your spacing and how to combine it with your assist will help shift it in. However, the obvious weakness of this team is that there's very little way to put on direct pressure due to the fact that only Goku is actually a full zoner. Everyone else has at least a couple of weaknesses in the zoning department. The result of that being that once those characters are in that setup, your situation is no longer useful. In short, at full screen, Vegeta and Cell don't have a good way to get offense started without calling Goku. So in this situation where Goku's already been lost and cannot cover that space, the fighting style has to change. And involves a lot more very specific tracking that increases difficulty quite a lot. Therefore, tactically, this player should generally focus on making sure that Goku does not fall, and similarly, their opponents should generally try their best to make sure that Goku is the first to fall. Similarly, Goku versus Frieza is not disadvantageous. However, Vegeta versus Golden Frieza is about as disadvantageous as you technically get. Vegeta is not too strong against zoning, and you're therefore relying a lot on his damage output and meter. As shown here. Fortunately, it pays off. And we move on.
どうやら修行で差がつきすぎてしまったらしいな。
It's time to face your opponent.
As we've noted in previous weeks, this team normally has Android 16 on it. Without 16, you lose both a particular part of your assist pressure game and a part of overall oppression, making Brawly have to work a lot harder. The opponent, therefore, since they no longer have to worry about a particular spacing, can make use of Broly's general weakness to Crouch Heavy and Dragon Rush at the expense of having to mentally switch when they see Frieza, because you're switching from one style of offense into another very quickly. The key, therefore, should be to get rid of Frieza as quickly as you can once he appears, so that you no longer have to worry about a heavy shift in your opponent's playstyle or new options appearing for them. This is one of those few times where landing a Dragon Rush and specifically switching an opponent's character in with the express intention of defeating that character actually matters. Often, a character chosen for a team for the purposes of changing up the potential playstyle can lack the synergy to help out and fill in the space in the match that you were hoping they would. But interestingly, the result of this is often that if you got rid of that character, depending on your own, the situation improves for you in a different way. Overall though, without 16, you can be a lot freer about how to approach Broly in the matchup and wear him down and use your meter in this sort of way. Because Broly takes so long to kill an opposing team, since he has such a generally difficult job of keeping them from switching. Fortunately, similarly, this is useful because Rabbit's defensive style makes it very difficult for him to properly take advantage of this, even though it's equally easy to switch on the other side. Since he is therefore forced to maximize damage and meter usage before it gets close enough to the point of actually getting the kill, if you can get your character back out, such as what would have happened in that situation potentially, they tend to regenerate a lot. The final result is that there's a lot of meter usage involved in here, and a lot of uncertainty from both sides.
Ready for battle! Ready? Fight it out!
仕方がありませんね。まずいな。まずいな。
Characters with moves that help you go forward, other than just their auto combo, or in the situation where their auto combo is not necessarily the best for it, but they have another move to use for it. Benefit from learning what the opponent thinks they should do after that. If you move forward a certain distance toward your opponent but don't reach them, especially if you do so purposely, understanding what response your opponent is most likely to have, either because they are ready for it or because they are not ready for it and therefore will just hit an automatic response, helps you prepare to either whiff punish, defend, or go into some trickier mix-up based on expecting them to react to your whiff. If your spacing is good, generally you can make sure that they want to react even though it would be a bad idea.
その痛み決して忘れるな。
showdown is about to begin. It's all or nothing.
The main problem with Goku pressure is that it mostly isn't real. In fact, one of Goku's best options for opening people up is actually to get to a relatively unsafe spot in his own string and deflect their counterattack. He is, however, decent at setting up Dragon Rush attempts. It should absolutely be noted that one of the largest problems with characters in this game that don't do a lot of damage, especially those who have to spend meter to get what they can, is that if you are good at switching, you tend to just soak up all that damage. Whereas your opponent tends to either take damage in larger chunks, or can't afford to switch too much or spend too much time focused on their switches, or they will give up whatever advantage they got by doing all of that in the first place. It's important that you absolutely view these as battles of attrition and believe that eventually, whatever advantage your character has over theirs will cause you to win out. Characters with good defense such as this often require you to understand your exact timing for Dragon Rushes. Fortunately, it looks like Kenshin-Han can carry this theme pretty well. Unfortunately, as noted, the damage just sometimes isn't there to deal with the situation. At least not without a ton of meter usage. Linear and straightforward tactics often also makes the situation complicated. Therefore, again, from the perspective of thinking of how to fight the match, you should try to take out the character on the team with the non-linear attack style, therefore you can continue to fight your battle of attrition. And from there, it's a matter of figuring out how not to leave yourself open in basic situations, as linear characters have much harder time conditioning people to do anything. It's important to recognize that, again, in order to tech Dragon Rushes in this game, you do not necessarily have to hit specific things. For many characters, their forward medium will cause them to become airborne at the moment that the Dragon Rush would connect, causing them to hit. Most even level 1 supers will avoid them. Crouch Heavy has a tendency to get away from them. And lighter buttons often tend to block the attack, and so on. Therefore, your opponent's chances of landing a Dragon Rush are much more connected to where they were on the screen in terms of either being confusing or at the point where you think you need to defend from another attack, but they go for the Dragon Rush instead. Inching forward in order to then land the Dragon Rush on you is about as easy as walking up and throwing someone who is not yet defending in other fighting games.
Are you ready? Go!
You see Frieza in now because Frieza is basically better equipped to deal with Goku. But Goku, in turn, cannot easily afford to switch out without landing a hit first, because of chances of the situation going poorly. Managing to switch Goku back in, for example, would be really useful for the same reason. Making your opponent even more worried about the Dragon Rush. This situation is also, for example, advantageous because Cell can manage to get out of here pretty quickly. But instead goes for the level 3. Potentially because the situation is exactly psychologically like that. You know that Cell has just gotten hit by a level 3 from full health and could easily regain all of that health. So our Cell player takes it upon themselves to just go, you know what, you're going to try to stop me from switching out. Let me just destroy it. You can absolutely make your opponent wear themselves out to do certain things. And you can use paying for that knowledge with your health to condition them even more. Because as we can see, in the end, Cell still has full health. This one is a bit much. Possibly execution error, but maybe not. Maybe it was to bait out this level 2. Because now the information is, oh, my opponent will attempt level 3 at that range. if I do mine first, or if I've pressured them in some other way, given that they had no one else to call on, and Cell does not have a lot of immediate approaches on other Cell. There wasn't really any other option other than hoping that the opponent was going to attack. But as soon as one person knows that there are very few options, the other person who probably knows that there are very few options as well.
A fierce showdown is about to begin! It's all or nothing! Fight it out!
僕も加勢します。
So stand heavy into combo stuff. And Trunks goes for the attack and possibly dies. Missed the execution on the switch, and the answer to that is yes. Now, as we know, Omni Rabbit doesn't manage all that well against zoners. Fortunately, Gohan 2M I'll keep on repeating it, please block low against the Dark Gohan. He absolutely can open you up the other way, it's just you take so much less damage. If you must chance being opened up by him managing to knock you in the head. But the general reason why Omni Rabbit has difficulty with zoners is because slowing down enough to measure the space is not really something that he does as often. His expectation is that his opponent will control the space, and he just has to respond to whatever that is. But a zoner is not necessarily concerned with that aspect of the game. They don't so much care about the space other than to decide which parts of it you get to occupy without getting hurt. Preferably none. But down to one character, the situation is a bit shifted, so... And since it is now Vegeta, zoning is not the strongest of options here. Basic sparking response to level 3 as usual. And once again another space opens for Gohan to actually get damage.
引退しても力は衰えていないな。僕も見習わなくちゃ。
The battle's about to start. Good luck.
The main issue that Just Vine's team has against zoners is needing to keep using assists without necessarily getting to get in as a result of it. Therefore, from the zoner side, they should alternate between mid-screen and full-screen zoning just to throw off Just Vine's assist usage. Gotenks, however, still can functionally zone quite well himself, especially with the support required, making it relatively easy to pull this off, even without necessarily switching into self. But as we know, experience with the cell mirror and confirming into stuff so that Gotenks can get going is an important part of the playstyle here. That, for example, was altogether keeping Gotenks in too long, as Gotenks mix-ups don't really matter against Vegeta, even when he's not using his invincible moves. In short, the boy has a long way to go before he can beat his father in a straight-up fight. Adding mid-range zoning to your playstyle in this situation allows you to spend a lot more time reacting to things that your opponent thinks are a good idea without them actually becoming a good idea. At the mid-range, zoning characters like these three tend to have really good ways of quickly clipping an opponent before they can do anything. And Vegeta being a defensive powerhouse at staying out of the way of particular things makes this even more difficult overall. Basically, you can't decide to just keep calm goals going on Vegeta. You'll sometimes find a way out of it. Unfortunately, as we've always said, even when alone, Cell can absolutely pour on the damage as long as he has enough meter to present a threat. He doesn't actually have to use this meter all the time. Just being able to do things like vanish means that the opponent has to think a lot more about particular positions on the screen, and can never feel quite safe enough to put up a strong defense.
ウォーミングアップのつもりが少しやりすぎてしまったかな。もう少し楽しませてくれると思ったが、見込み違いだったようだな。
Now let's look at what happens when the two teams do have some zoning on both sides. The key point here is that one side has effectively constant zoning assists, whereas the other has the 1.5. This means that their approach to spacing in the matchup has to be different. So let's look at what we get. Fortunately, Vegeta benefits in this matchup from having, again, two zoners who back him up from particular directions fairly easily. Still, Tenshinhan ends up pumping out the damage as is needed. And eating the level 3, which at this case is technically a good thing, because it basically is again paying with health. One could easily either activate Sparking if you ended up taking a hit when you didn't intend to, or manage the swap, and Tenshinhan will probably just get to heal, especially since the opponent is basically a zoner and will end up sitting on that for a long time. There's that Gohan to M. Again, Gohan to M is problematic because it opens up most of his good conversion combo routes. Unlike his auto combo, which does less. Therefore, you mostly care about getting hit by that one. Similarly, as a Gohan player, you eventually have to learn what to do to players who block low all the time. But, for the most part, it doesn't even matter that much. As you can note, Metacon in this case doesn't even really use Gohan's elbow. It's things like that that make the character seem so very strong. Because beating him relies a lot on understanding how he gets his damage and minimizing it rather than defending entirely against it.
showdown is about to begin.
For example, one of Gohan's other problems, even if he lands the entire auto combo from the ground, is that the opponent tends to end up in a situation where they could easily leave and recharge their health. And since he doesn't combo very well from there, given that he has no supers to confirm into from the air, you should just generally consider him to have relatively low damage in that regard. It may in fact be to your benefit to just go straight into Gohan's actual auto combo. But again, since light auto combos don't go into supers automatically, and as soon as Gohan is in the air he no longer has any supers, you absolutely have to consider whether or not you need to come up with a different way or a different timing for your switch in order to actually get any damage off Gohan's defensive prowess. While it is good that he has this clean defense, you can bet that the main reason top players played him for so long and then were doing so well with him was not because of his ability to punish. If punishing, especially for big damage, was a thing that made a big deal, King Gohan would be way more popular despite his shortcomings, given that he can punish pretty much anything. Adult Gohan's strength was always pressure and at least somewhat mix-ups. Here we have the measured after movement. Leading to a good 2H. But again, you have to be pretty on point with Gohan to get damage off his stuff once he's gone into the air. And a lot of Gohan's stuff goes into the air. It helps, of course, if he has an assist he can call to hang the player there while he gets back down. However, in Omni Rabbit's team, that particular method would involve a lot of very precise spacing, which is already the problem with the character. Meaning that overall, you can see why he ends up being played in this team the way he is, because functionally, his weaknesses make it impossible for him to do what people consider to be adult Gohan things in Omni Rabbit's team specifically, and he has to be used differently. The differently that he is capable of being is relatively effective given the strength of his defense. But one cannot just discount the fact that the character's damage potential can be lacking in particular situations.
The outcome of this fight is anybody's guess.
Similarly, he has some trouble tricking people into not blocking when he's approaching, especially since they know that he doesn't really benefit that much from getting in close. Now we've come to the question of how good a zoner is Gotenks if he has backup? The answer is actually very good. Gotenks zoning is usually complicated because he has to be in the air to do it. But this is also helpful because Gotenks spends a lot of time in the air first of all and approaches from the air fairly well. Therefore, the opponent seeing Gotenks leave the ground is not a marker for them to do a counterattack. If anything, it is the opposite. They don't expect this to lead to a zoning attack from him. Similarly, Vegeta benefits a lot from having the assist he does because he can use it to augment his ability to move around in the air, back and forward, without having to launch his own relatively slower or difficult to target, or sometimes just unsafe attack. Vegeta's air position doesn't really need Vegeta to attack, opening him up to a lot of options in terms of both his mobility and things like getting dragon rushes like that. And once he's managed to get the opening, it's back to Gotenks for damage and pressure. The rest is just a matter of, again, taking advantage of the fact that Goku doesn't really open you up. He just gives the impression that he will eventually. He absolutely can Dragon Rush you, but depending on your situation, you don't necessarily care that much. Always look at the weaknesses of characters first, whether or not you intend to play them yourself, or want to take advantage of your opponents. Your character may not have a direct way to deal with their weakness, but having something, or some idea of when an advantage has appeared that you should capitalize on also helps quite a lot. For example, in that situation, Cell was actually less effective not because Cell is bad at ending those combos, but simply because when Cell is knocking you downward from an aerial combo, it's optimal to have your assists available, regardless of what they are, to buy Cell time to reach the ground and cause trouble. Since the assist had mostly just been used very quickly, it simply wasn't possible. Sadly, Vegeta's ability to open you up himself without a Dragon Rush from this sort of position where he has no assists of his own is pretty bad. In other words, your solution to Vegeta is mostly block. And the Galactic Donut Lockdown ends this particular match. We see the return of 16 this time. Potentially partially because playing this match with Frieza is just harder, or just because it was time to switch back.
まずお前から血祭りにあげてやる。
Or maybe just to give our new arrivals some direct experience with the heavier oppression style. Looks like we've switched who gets Blue Cell this time though, which might get a little confusing.
楽しめそうだ。
But maybe not, given that it seems as if the entire color scheme might have changed. Probably not normally in this color, as far as I remember. Or maybe he is. I know he wasn't in this color before though, so onward!
楽しめそうだ。
Yep, we got some green solidarity going on today.
終わりか。山をすぐに終わらせてやろう。
So we see the same situation again. Understanding exactly how much damage you get to take before your opponent has to go for something big to finish you is important. Obviously, you should build up your skill at not being caught off guard when you want to switch out, or recognizing that you simply need to level 3 or do something else to prevent the situation. But once you do pick that up, and it's not generally too hard to do, you can improve quite a lot in that regard. And quite frankly, of the characters necessary on that team, it wasn't absolutely needed to set up like that. Since 16 is still around, there is still an oppressive character set up on the other team. Relatively long normals and a good sense of trapping space means that the harder part of this is figuring out how to get your characters back out after they've taken enough damage to force play of the neutral. No luck day. This is partially because Android 16 is not a character who can absolutely go from deflect into punish, making it harder to deal with. However, we have the other problem from the other side. Cell with full meter. And we'll repeat that Cell with full meter is literally a perfect powerhouse. Fortunately, 2 Cell with equal meter is a different matter. This has more to do with the understanding of cell strings and specifics such as that. But since the Sparking Blast is available on this side, it looks like things will probably go the other way.
Son Goku, やはり貴様とは敵として戦いたいものだな。
be a great fight.
So above all, the key here is to figure out when you can afford to pay life and which of your moves will cause your opponent to, successfully or unsuccessfully, attempt to use something that deals a lot of damage from their side. So let's watch this match from that perspective. How can either player get the other to take an action that is incorrect by nature? We're seeing a lot more changes in the perceptions of the tiers of this game as people get more and more used to the weaknesses of characters and how to capitalize on them. The less explored a character is, the more likely it is that the character's weaknesses are not well known. Therefore, any with obvious strengths when you start tend to get the treatment of basically saying, this character is one of the best, they're basically unstoppable, and so on. Often, this is compounded by the fact that any character with a lot of good options in most fighting games will at least theoretically be a strong character, regardless of any other aspects. And since high-level players who create tier lists are often very good at understanding the strengths of a character from theory, but not necessarily as good at seeing every other character's method for taking advantage of the weaknesses, the tier lists tend to shake around a little bit at the 3 and 6 month marks. We had one big tier perception shift at the end of April, and we're due for another one soon, possibly prompted by some rethinking of things based on performances by character specialists that have been appearing recently. The balance patch also helped quite a lot, introducing a few new weaknesses to characters that allow people to think about the matchups with them differently, carry forward more of their own character strengths.
まずお前から血祭りにあげてやる。
初めから全力でかかってくるんだな。
Obviously, as noted, since everyone in this lounge basically plays each other weekly, the understanding of the defensive perspectives and the ability to fight develops regardless of anything I am saying or have to say in general. And you can just add that on if you want to. Understanding that Adult Gohan, for example, doesn't have really good damage is really helpful to you. You can see that even when he does manage to get the down slam and open you up by using the elbow, sometimes this does next to nothing. You really might as well just let him. But, of course, it takes a little while to understand and know that because we're conditioned in fighting games to not want to get hit, rather than to spend a lot of time thinking about how much damage it does when we do. As you can see here, for example, this is a huge Krillin combo to do 20%. It spent meter and everything. But Krillin gains no advantage from that position, so in the end, it wasn't really that helpful. This combo is obviously much better, but it's still not a lot of damage. Part of the reason Krillin seems like a weak character is actually that he has relatively poor combo routes in particular situations. You have to understand his mix-ups very well in order to get a lot out of it. Here we have... Oh, it didn't work. Interesting. Normally the purpose of that is to just do the super so that you can hold the button and switch to the other character using the meter. I suppose it didn't work this time. Gotenks, as mentioned before, the best option against Broly is to open with blocking, especially with 2 zoning assists to help out. From there, Gotenks can assess what to go for next. Sometimes it's just stalling until the zoning assists are ready again to buy him an opening. Against this particular opposing team, Gotenks does not have to worry about the assists helping Broly to get in on him or particularly open him up, and since he can easily go into the air to avoid a ton of Broly's stuff, he really only cares about having enough power to keep this up. The main problem that Gotenks has in this matchup is that without his assist, it's difficult for him to space himself correctly to land hits on a character like Broly from neutral. But Cell can come in and pick up on that, and in fact, having Gotenks literally just soak up the damage at first can be useful for a lot of reasons. He's not a character who generally gets hit often enough that you're too worried about him having his health in the mid-range as you see it now. So, since Cell and Vegeta are slightly less effective without meter, trying to get the advantage with Gotenks and building up meter, sometimes by him getting hit even, it's alright if you can manage to not get him lost. Unfortunately, if you do lose him, Cell loses a lot of his lockdown, and Vegeta loses a lot of his spacing options, making this overall match much harder given that the opponent now only has to worry about attacks from particular vectors and knows that they won't be locked down by anything. Since Cell mostly lacks non-obvious attack routes, which is actually one of the weaknesses of the character, until you know his attack strength well, you would easily come to the conclusion that Cell has a lot of pressure and a lot of mix-ups, but he actually only has one or two. He's just very good at confirming things when you do get them. High-level players have more Cell mix-ups, but this is because they practice the character far more and have very specific things within both their team, their spacings, and their meter to create setups for Cell that do not normally exist for mid to intermediate players. But as you can see, without Gotenks around to help him out, Vegeta has to play a very slow, methodical game that doesn't really suit going up against the characters with the potential to zone as well as they are. Finding the right moment to therefore do something like the raw dash up Dragon Rush is good, but that would probably still have been tech. Fortunately, Vegeta's sort of counting on that. He manages just as well when it is tech because of his invincible moves and just the type of character he is as a whole. But it looks like today he got stepped on.
Get ready for a Dragon Ball Rumble! Are you ready? Go!
So from the other side, what do we know about this? If you don't move against Natakon's Niku, you're in very little danger. In short. But you can't necessarily open him up in the standard way either. And this is going to be a very good test for both characters because Just Fine's flow and team at the moment lead to a lot of Dragon Rush timings, which Natakan has already mentioned at some point needing to work on. It's hard to kill this team because of the difficulty of dealing enough damage with the current team. Eventually, you're just going to get worn down. But can you land enough Dragon Rushes to make this a problem? Because it's going to come down to really specific management of assists and understanding of spacing. However, the more the Dragon Rushes are landed, the larger the growth in the meter disparity. Because Gohan and Goku must use far more meter to do far less. Eventually, it's likely that we're going to see a lot of chip down. And large amounts of work from one side to keep up. You can already see the benefit on Just Fine's side of this particular flip. However, there is always reserve Tenshinhan and his massive damage output. To turn the tide of battle. Therefore, the question becomes, is one's defense good enough to prevent getting opened up by Tien in general, or should you generally aim to get rid of Tien as soon as possible? Honestly, fairly hard to say. But without any assists, Gotenks is generally only able to handle Tien. Interestingly, Gotenks is most capable of handling Tenshinhan at this point. And could probably manage to finish him in one shot if really needed to be done. But what does that mean in terms of the flow? It's a very difficult decision to make from Natakon's side because despite the fact that he has a whole 2 characters with more life altogether, neither of those characters can really catch Gotenks. It's the same problem as with, well, half the characters in the game, honestly. Eventually, maybe if you land enough big enough super, you'll manage it, but overall, keeping track of and bringing down Gotenks with Goku and adult Gohan is a lot of work. Especially since the sparking lasted so long. And with that missed opportunity, there might be something to worry about, even given these health values. But no, there we go. There's the punish. And Goku's strong conversions from to M resolve the situation. Make sure you understand exactly what your team is capable of so that you can plan correctly in matches. So well played on both sides, as Tien is absolutely the carry for this team and was used accordingly to put down 2 of Just Fine's characters very cleanly.
This should be a great fight!
なんだろう。他人の気がしない。
Get ready! Let's go!
すぐに終わらせてやる。さて
あんま似合って任せてください。終わらせてやる。
そんなはずはない。セルがいい。じゃじゃーん。
全力でいくぞ。
Let's go!
許さんぞ。行くぞ。まだまだ。
じゃあ少しこいつはどうか。さてと。
いっぱい飛ばす。大丈夫ですか。許さんぞ。
さてと。この程度か。世間前はこの私にバリアを張らせると。
We did say we were going to go into combo theory somewhat in the upcoming weeks. Today we're covering exactly one part of that as we get closer to the end of our stream. There are specific attacks that can be done from the pop-ups you get from jump cancels, and a different set of attacks that can be done from the super dash wall bounce that comes from a stand heavy. This is because of the vector of the character relative to the super dash involved, if there is even a super dash. Unfortunately, Cell had not recharged yet to call in for the finish of that, but still doing okay. And there we see Finland's special power. Goten's mobility still paying off, but finally getting Dragon Rush at the end without managing to actually gain Cell that much meter, making that part the difficult part of this remaining matchup. Therefore, understanding whether or not you can convert into bigger damage because of your vector is important. The reason the vector is important is primarily that when you are going from a particular spacing, you get to hit your characters down H in the air, if your character has a good one of that, and continue to pop up the opponent. This also allows you to go into a super dash switch for whichever character you want if you specifically wanted a different one. In combos where you don't have that option or would have to rely on your opponent tacking in a particular direction or being near to the corner in order to do it, it's a lot easier for your opponent to slip out without taking too much damage. So, combo starters are not just about scaling or proration, whatever you want to call it, but about the vector that your character sends the opponent in relative to themselves, and whether or not you have anyone to switch into, or if you have to use meter. You can actually tell when your team is good based somewhat on how difficult it is to play them when one of them dies. Using assists and being unable to call them to help you with particular things can be a really big deal for a lot of teams, but it generally means that your team's function and synergy together are going quite well if that's your concern and complaint. Because you can resolve that simply by getting better at using your team as a unit, which in almost every case in this game reduces the amount of time you have to worry about them getting finished off one or the other. It's very difficult at this point, in both Just Fine and Omni Rabbit's case, to take out one of their characters while the other two are around. You can even use damage like this just to buy time to switch Gotenks out, or bait the opponent into thinking you're going to, which is equally effective. Your opponent therefore ends up spending a lot of effort to do very little against Cell, for example, when there's a good chance Cell is just going to switch back out. So all of this effort to finish him off doesn't lead to much if he just gets away in the end. Understanding how to use the whole team and quickly convert one into the other leads to much higher levels of play, as you can see in a lot of high-level play where the characters are generally all standing for a very long time. And commentators and players alike tend to think it's more or less a foregone conclusion in certain situations if you lose your characters. The trade-off here is that if your opponent has used a lot of energy and a lot of meter to try to get rid of your characters, you may still be able to get some advantage by using your own or using your conditioning to make a couple of good guesses or push your opponent into situations that aren't as beneficial to them and still finish. This is so far, from our observation, the key to really good comebacks. But overall, you can watch the difficulty of breaking down Just Fine's team when they are working properly together. And Goten's ability to buy massive amounts of time for Cell and Half Dad to come back in and assist more means that no matter how much effort you put in, unless you have optimal situations, getting rid of Gotenks is going to be really hard. Is that combined synergy that creates this durability. Meaning that for your own planning, you often need to use your own most offensive character or save all of your meter for one big push in order to disable the team synergy rather than try to wear down the characters themselves. Now we see a switch in team. This team is much less about zoning, which is technically a better fit for this matchup. Because even though, again, Brawly is quite zonable, once he gets in, it's hard to get him back off. However, Gotenks and Bardock don't necessarily work that well together in most team compositions. You have to have a very specific style to make these two really click. And Brawly getting to basically walk you to the corner might be less than helpful. However, the first part of the style in question can already be seen, so you may get to see a display of that particular playstyle in this match. The main strength of Gotenks plus Bardock is that it strengthens Gotenks' super dash game. Meaning that you can still play in a sort of zoning style. Particularly against this team, who doesn't have a really large set of great ways to stop super dashes. You could attempt to just 2H through your way through all of them, but that's where Bardock comes in. Unfortunately, with Gotenks lost, the situation changes rapidly and drastically back in the other direction. Because Bardock lacks the character potential to really press on any other character without using some assist to set up a defense. And Vegeta is not exactly the best assist to set up Bardock defense. since it makes the opponent not want to take up a particular space on screen in the first place. Meaning that Bardock just ends up getting counter-zoned like this, and Vegeta doesn't exactly do a whole ton about it. Bardock is such a good close-range character that there's just no reason to go close to him in the first place. Your concern, therefore, is does Bardock have an assist that will make sure he can get there? Vegeta, however, stands in a similar situation. And the general concept of Bardock being, he is actually relatively easy to deflect, but you can't make him get off you otherwise. Cell, who does not have a lot of really great ways of attacking that space that Bardock is jumping in, is better off in fact switching to Broly, but obviously the response to that is to switch Vegeta in against Broly. So with the massive meter advantage, unless Cell can take out Vegeta in one shot, this is not going to matter too much. And there we go.
Vegeta! Win!
その程度か。
As an opponent, you can use the same combo theory in a defensive manner. If you shift the situation so that your opponent's good vectors are simply never the ones you are in, even if they do damage you, they won't damage you as much.
Get ready! Fight it out!
Now, zoning Broly as a whole could be easy if not for the fact that Cell as an assist covers enough zoning to cause the beams to cross, basically. When Cell is on cooldown, basically zoning works. And then we have Goku getting one of his better combo routes into damage. Which will matter if we can't get 16 out, but there he goes. Cell can only handle Goku particularly well when Cell has enough meter, or when the Goku player is impatient. '16, on the other hand, manages Gohan a lot better because of '16's powerful movement relative to Gohan's low tracking. But there's that Gohan 2M. And with it, a lot of stress. Please know that Gohan's 2M is not really it's a risky tool. So, not only do you block it because it prevents you from taking the maximum damage from it, you block it because it helps you hurt him. Even if you don't have any good attacks of your own, fairly early into the match, you can punish it with your assist or something. At worst, Gohan will continue into things that don't necessarily leave him too vulnerable, but certainly are advantageous positionally to you. Is it a juggle? Yes it is. Unfortunately, as with most of Cell's mid-screen combo routes, it scales terribly, therefore meaning it didn't really do much. And as usual, we are coming to the final match of the night. In this case, probably once again closing out with one of our standard. As this has often been our closing match, there's usually not much to say about it. Since again, we don't really get to talk about Omni Rabbits about Gohan, given that that's a different style altogether. We are of course seeing more creative baits now that players are in fact watching for the tendencies of their opponents. But here we have Gohan versus 16, which as I've just mentioned is generally bad for Gohan if the 16 player is aware of Gohan's weaknesses. His poor tracking combined with 16's better normals means that he spends a lot of time trying to get damage and 16 bouncing out of it. It's much better to just leave it to Krillin. Since Krillin can do a lot more stuff from the air and from really far away. So again, you see the switch. Krillin vs 16 isn't something one wants to experience, so Cell comes in. This match is approximately even enough that neither player will necessarily want to switch from here until they have to. But as 16 now has the most health, he's going to soak up some of Krillin's advantage. And Krillin's going to use that time to get some meter and put as much damage on the board as possible. Brawly has a relatively large advantage over Krillin, but only when his assists are ready. Meaning that by the time the assists become ready, Trunks is able to come in and take over and use his own advantage against Brawly to take him out. At mid-level, it's all relatively heavy matchup strategy like this. Eventually, we all hit the point where we basically maximize our damage, and other people are just thinking about how best to push forward on the plan. Gohan goes for the crouch heavy. Perfect timing in that case. When your moves don't give you enough tracking, stick to the basics. But as you see here, tons of scaling, nearly no damage. Still, it's better to generally keep it that way because this allows Gohan to buy more time to keep his assists out, which is the real way of locking down Cell. Either way, that brings us to the end of the stream. Tomorrow, stop by for some relatively random content. We've got Absolver free on PS Plus this week. 13 gigs download, you can check it out. It's sort of a fighting game. It's a customizable, you'll get it when you get it. There's no real way to explain it. Next week, Monday, will be another Mishmash Lounge, and of course, Tuesday for Tuesday Train Guilty Gear. Wednesday for more Sandbag Casuals, and then we're back around to Kame House next Thursday as always. So, this has been Rillian for the 2MK team. Enjoy your evening, everyone.